So I'm going to do this video on being a stone Buddha because I do these videos based on feel, and this just felt like the right thing to do. I do have a couple others also in line, and then I'll get back to this idea that the thinking mind is a program running in the skull that so many of us mistake for who we truly are. And I think that's really, really important, and it's really the focus of my the book that I'm working on right now. But I want to talk about this stone Buddha concept because so many of us who are on this path of spirituality or climbing this spiritual mountain, we have a really difficult time because people often mistake the goal of Buddhism as somehow being immune to any kind of emotional reaction or emotionless or flat affect. And so you can imagine like a stone Buddha, like it's the exact opposite of what it means to be flesh and blood and to feel and be an emotional creature. It's almost like Descartes when he imagined the soul as being completely devoid of anything emotional because emotions were tied to the body. And he was right with that. But the thing he missed is that's part of our trip as being human beings. And so I had two really big emotional events this year. One was, and they both involved loss. And so one was about a 22-year career in academia that was suddenly gone. And the second, far more intense, was my daughter leaving to go to college 10 hours away. And so, that was a tough one. So, when I experience these emotions, which that is the goal to me. I mean, Buddhism just means being awake. So being awake to an emotion that's happening right now is really the practice, in my opinion. But while expressing these, I had so many comments by people. Not like hundreds, nothing like that, but a couple here and there that caught my attention. And they were usually something like, "Oh, I thought you studied Buddhism. Doesn't that make you somehow immune to these types of reactions?" And I tried to explain the exact opposite is the case. Buddhism should help you be awake to what is happening in reality and whatever that is. And so when we get to the love-loss equation, you can think about it as like a yin-yang symbol, because it is. To love is to have courage, because whether it's a career or job or another being, love means the potential for loss, and that's why we see in the yin yang the things that look like the opposite are actually connected. And what the thinking mind wants to do is the thinking mind wants to go in there like Phaedrus's knife and just cut through the yin yang symbol, take all the good, and then pretend like the loss doesn't exist. But so much of what I talk about is this paradox that what we run from follows us. And that was really my first insight. And it's true not just of anxiety. So if you desperately don't want to be anxious, that is anxiety. And that same paradox is true for feelings. And so if you desperately feel like you don't want to feel the way you feel, that's just going to intensify the emotions. But the interesting thing about it is none of this really came online until the thinking mind started labeling which emotions were good and which emotions were not. And so when we are attracted to one emotion and then feel negative towards another, that is the thinking mind's judgment of what we should be experiencing and what we should be avoiding. But again, there's that paradox that when we run, it follows us more intensely. And that's so true with emotions. And so we can see the meddling of the thinking mind, this thinking mind thinking that it's the CEO, that it knows what's best and that these emotions should be experienced and that these should not, seems to get us even deeper into trouble. And that's why I like Alan Watts. He tells so many stories of Zen masters with bad tempers. And that helps break this Western idea that spirituality is like being a stone Buddha. So these Zen masters, there's all kinds of stories of teachers in the East having tempers and having an absolutely full range of emotion. But the difference is they don't go on a guilt trip about it. The emotion comes like a storm. It might be a bad storm. It might be a storm of loss or depression. But once it's felt, it moves along very quickly. It's actually the attempt to not have the emotion expressed that is the very thing that keeps it around for so long, and that makes it felt like it's in the body. And so these repressed emotions, these emotions that the thinking mind has done so much work to avoid experiencing. And you say, well, how do I do this? How do I experience well, you are experiencing the emotion. The thinking mind is doing the dance pretending that it's not. And so, like anything else, I would suggest is the recognition, which is to say being completely awake to the experience that you are not just this thinking mind. And when that happens, the emotion just flows. And if it's sadness, it will be sad, and it will be intensive. And if it's loss, you will feel the loss. But the nice thing about this, the way the mechanics are set up, is it's exactly the opposite of what so many of us think. And that is to say, if you are awake and you experience the emotion, it's never it's never as sad as we think it is. It's never as devastating as we think it is. It's just part of our humanity, and it defines us as human beings to feel before we think. Remember, there were feeling creatures on planet Earth 600 million years before we started thinking. The thinking mind is very new. So when it waged war with these emotions by trying to find ones that we should have and avoid those emotions that we shouldn't, it really set up that conflict, that inner conflict that we feel. And so when you recognize that program running inside the skull is doing all this, and it's the one that's telling you this emotion is bad, this emotion isn't, then you recognize that that program isn't who you are. Then the emotions flow, and they flow naturally like a river. And to be awake through this is to fully embrace our experience of our humanity.